Broncos country, what is up? I'm the Kodiak Broncos podcast, and it is time to talk about Garrett Wilson to Denver. So this is going to be very exciting because the offseason is my favorite time of year, talking about how each team can improve, and now it's time to see what the Broncos can do to take steps forward and finally compete in the AFC and become a legit contender. Now, I just want to say a couple things. Leave a like if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're not already. I post pretty much every day. And drop a comment. Let me know what you think of this move if it were to happen. And yeah, follow me on Twitter if you like what I have to say on here at Kodiak Broncos. Let's dive right into it. So let's talk about Garrett Wilson real quick. Who is he? I'm sure you've heard the name. I'm sure you've heard about him through fantasy, and you've probably seen his highlights because he's a pretty good player. And he's an exceptionally talented wide receiver who has the way I put it, not living up to full potential on the New York Jets syndrome. Because the Jets, they have a knack for ruining offensive talent. They ruined Zach Wilson. They're ruining Garrett Wilson. I mean, I guess Breece Hall's done actually relatively well. They can't draft offensive linemen. They can't develop pretty much hardly anything. But Garrett Wilson has really held his own as a wide receiver, even though he is on the New York Jets and has probably received some of the worst quarterback play and offensive coaching since he came into the league in 2022. And he was the 10th overall pick from Ohio State in a stacked 2022 wide receiver draft. So 8th overall to Atlanta, you had London, and then 10th overall to the Jets, you had Wilson. 11th overall to the Saints, you had Olave. Just after that, at 12th, you had Jameson Williams, and then there were a few other guys that I had. I'm thinking of that were sprinkled in there that ended up becoming non-factors like Dotson or Burks. But it was a pretty good wide receiver class. That's what I'm trying to get at. And he has been at the helm of some of the worst quarterback play and offensive coaching in the NFL since he came in. I've already talked about that. And he's rumored to be on the outs because of the Jets' dysfunction, because of Woody Johnson and his kids running the team, his kids talking about, the man rating or whatever. And in my opinion, he's the top 15 wide receiver in the NFL talent-wise and a true number one wide receiver. And you might say, well, top 15 wide receiver talent, that feels a little low. But listen, there's a lot of really, really good wide receivers in the NFL. The main thing that matters is I do think that he's a true number one wide receiver. So as far as career stats for Garrett Wilson and the New York Jets, he has, hit around the 150 target mark every single year, but he has also gone for over 1,000 every single year. And when these stats require context and the fact that, the Jets offensively, they've been really, really bad ever since he entered the league, and he's still putting up these kinds of numbers, I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. Now, you might be saying 1,000 yards, that's not really that hard to do in the modern NFL. And for the most part, I agree. But at the same time, when you are dealing with Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers being your starting quarterbacks for the most part, it just hasn't been a pretty sight as far as what you're going to do. But he remains highly productive. And I think if he gets freed from the shackles of the New York Jets, we could really, really see him go ham in the right situation and really showcase what kind of talent he is in the NFL. Now, according to Rich Cimini, who I actually didn't know who that was before I started doing my research for this video, people in Garrett Wilson's camp expect him to request a trade this offseason. So Rich Cimini is a New York Jets insider for ESPN New York, and a lot of people are thinking that he's going to request a trade, and I don't blame him. I think a lot of people would be surprised if he didn't request a trade because we see players try to get out of dysfunctional situations all the time, even if the number one reason for trade requests is contract issues, but I could see Garrett Wilson, even if New York was willing to offer him what he wanted for his second contract, I could still see him being like, no, I don't want to come back. So why does he potentially want out? Well, here's the deal. The Jets, they have a knack for choosing horrible offensive coaching staffs. So in 2022, they fired Mike LaFleur. And I didn't think it could really get much worse for them on the offensive side of the ball coaching-wise, but what did they do? They hired Nathaniel Hackett, they hired Todd Downing, they hired Keith Carter, all three of whom were the forefront leaders of the NFL's worst offenses in 2022. Hackett was obviously from Denver, and Downing and Carter were from Tennessee. So the Jets looked at, what we were able to do on the offensive side of the ball that year, and because Rodgers is frat bros with Nathaniel Hackett, they were just like, yeah, I think that'd be a good hire. And ultimately, there's no cure for incompetence in the modern NFL. Even if Aaron Rodgers was running the offensive coordinator, he just doesn't have the talent to bail out those guys anymore. And unless they hire Ben Johnson, they're not going to get a revolutionary offensive mind. I could see them going with Rex Ryan. I could see them going with Vance Joseph, who, I would hate that hire, but I could see them doing it. And it's just going to be really, really interesting to see what they do at the offensive coordinator position. because I can almost guarantee that they're going to make the wrong hire because they just have a tendency to do that. And ultimately, it's just not an attractive spot for up and coming coaching candidates. So once again, unless Ben Johnson goes there, which I highly doubt he does, they're just not getting anything on the offensive side of the ball that I think would be beneficial to them in the grand scheme of things. The Johnson family is also doing a horrific job of running the Jets, whether they're nixing a trade for Jerry Jeudy because he doesn't have a high Madden rating, or whether they're talking about, those awkward post-game speeches. They're just not doing a good job of running a football program over there, and it's not going to get any worse it's not going to get any better unless they sell the team. Now, watched Aaron Rodgers. He's bringing too much baggage and not enough good play to back it up. He's bringing all the trash cans from his days in Green Bay, like Lazard, like Randall Cobb, to the team, and they're offering basically nothing. They're not a winning football program. He's going on Pat McAfee and just talking about the most bizarre stuff. Garrett Wilson also took a backseat in the second half of the year to Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard, just basically stat padding their way through the year and trying to make it look like that their 5-12 season was not as embarrassing as it actually was. Now, what does he bring as a player? So he has done a lot with horrible quarterback play and coaching, and I've kind of alluded to that early on in this video, but he is one of the best pure separators and route winners in the game. You look at his reception perception profile, who Matt Harmon does a great job with all this, and basically his methodology is how many times could a quarterback realistically hit a player, and how many times could Garrett Wilson, or did Garrett Wilson, defeat a defensive back on basically an individual rep. Now, his chart is basically all green. There is not a single weakness in this game besides, I guess, the flat routes. But he's the only player in NFL history to command 150 targets within the first 3 years. Now, you could talk about him, kind of being force-fed, if you will, in a sense, because honestly, they didn't have anything else around Garrett Wilson. But he's still a very, very good player. His efficiency per target has managed to be pretty good relative to his target quality, and he can win in the slot or outside. There's nowhere he doesn't shine on the NFL field. He's an exceptional yak threat who can really, really turn on the burners. Okay, now we're talking about his man coverage success percentile rate, almost 80%, which is in the 96th percentile. Zone coverage success rate, 82%, which is, 80th, 79th percentile. Listen, we need to get better around Bo Nix literally everywhere on this team. We need to get better around Bo Nix, as far as pass catching, as far as, not really offensive line, but there's still some question marks there. We need better complementary pieces on the defensive side of the ball. That way we're not getting run over by Buffalo again and only having the ball for 18 minutes in a single game. And listen, Garrett Wilson is a better asset than literally every other wide receiver in this upcoming draft. So at the 20th overall spot, you're probably looking at Emeka Egbuka and Garrett Wilson, even though he still has one cheap year left, and you'd probably have to pay him a monster extension after 2025 if you were to make this move, then I still think he's a better asset and a more valuable trade piece, because there is an element of raw value that comes into play. For example, I don't think the Cardinals last year would have traded the number 4 overall pick in Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Jets for Garrett Wilson. Same with the Giants at number 6 and Malik Neighbors. But ultimately, Garrett Wilson, he's still a better asset than literally every other wide receiver in this upcoming draft. I think that even includes Ted McMillan, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick. And listen, 20th overall, it's not a premium enough pick to where it's an untradeable piece. I know that you're going to be looking at guys potentially there, like Warren, like Genty, but listen, the Broncos, they overall need to rethink skill position development and coaching in general, because every top 3 round skill position pick since 2014, so I'm talking every first, second, third round pick that they've spent on a running back, a tight end, a wide receiver since 2014, besides Courtland Sutton and Marvin Mims, they all have busted. So the Broncos, they need to rethink how they attack skill position guys in general. They need to either look for different traits, or they need to do something different and maybe trade for some proven talent. Maybe I'd be actually pretty upset if they didn't look elsewhere for wide receiver, running back, or tight end coach this upcoming offseason. But here's the final verdict. So, gun to my head, Wilson for 20th overall right now. Let's say the Jets GM is on the phone, and whoever takes over the team, and they're like, "Hey, Kodiak, do you think we should trade Garrett Wilson to you for the 20th overall pick?" Gun to my head, I'm saying yes. I'm saying yes because a lot can change with these 3 months as far as team needs or draft stock, and I don't see a guy who has as much of an impact on this team as Garrett Wilson being available at that pick, besides maybe Tyler Warren. And I know everybody wants Tyler Warren, but he's more likely to rise in the draft rather than fall. And, he's being mocked around our range right now. And I understand what he can do for this offense. And I understand that we don't have a dude who can win over the middle of the field. But with Garrett Wilson, that alleviates a lot of pressure. That alleviates a lot of pressure for the rest of the guys to win over the middle of the field. And Garrett Wilson, he can just find the soft spots in zones. Now, that's the argument for him against a guy like Tyler Warren. Now, I'd be happy with either. Don't get me wrong. And automatically, you just get a lot better offensively by trading for a guy like Garrett Wilson. I kind of made a mistake in my notes there. But yeah, that's how I'm thinking. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.